if we're ready to sort of progress to the reflection for this morning, sort of the formation piece, what I'd like to do is to think a little bit about the difference between religion and spirituality. And lots of people are writing about that sort of distinction, as to try and distinguish between some of the things that we do and then what is at the heart of what we're doing. Because what I'm very aware of is that everything has changed in the sense that all of our sort of religious practices in one way have been sort of disrupted. We are still clearly doing them, and we have been doing those things, worshipping and holding worship services in different ways. But to think about what exactly we're up to, and then because what we're needing to do is transform what we do into new ways of accessing, like I talked about last week, the timeless qualities in these experiences. So to explain the difference between what I call religion and what a lot of writers today would be terming the difference between religion and spirituality, think about the two Native American tribes. They're actually, their reservations are sort of back up to each other in Arizona, the Navajo people and the Hopi people. Now, in the Hopi way of understanding, there are many, many gods that they, or spirits that they believe in. And so they have like a rain god and different gods that cover all aspects of human experience. And a big part of it, both of these reservations are in the desert, so there's not a lot of rain. And to get the rain for the crops that they do get is really important. So because there's a rain god that the Hopis believe in, they can appeal to this god, amongst many other gods, to help them or to manifest the rain for them. And so their religious practice is, and they practice very extensively, the rain dance. And their belief is that if they get it just right, then the rain god will be pleased and will bestow upon the people the rain, and they'll be able to plant crops and survive in the desert. Now, as I said, neighboring reservation, the people of the Navajo people, they don't really have a god or lots of gods that can impact and change our day-to-day experience. And so they are living in this desert, and they, oops, something's happened. In their cosmology, they have the wise elders, the people who have gone before. But what the wise elders do, that they don't change the circumstances of the life that we're in, or the people are living. What the wise elders would do is give them wisdom on how to live in the midst of what they're going on, so that these people won't be changing their circumstances. And so what that means in their whole spirituality and their practice is to restore people to harmony with their environment. It's not that they're appealing to sort of external deities to change the current circumstance. They realize we're living in a desert, and we need to be wise in the way in which we live in this desert. And so the whole focus of their faith experience is to be restored to harmony with the life that is around them. So, for example, and the word that they would use for harmony would be hozero. And translated into English, it's probably somewhere between peace, harmony, and beauty. And I know in the Christian faith, church, when we dismiss people, for example, from the end of the worship service, we would say, go in peace. Well, in the Navajo tradition, they would probably say, go in beauty. And I really like that idea of walking in beauty. And they have a prayer that's very similar to St. Patrick's breastplate. They say, today I walk in beauty, beauty in front of me, beauty beside me, beauty behind me. Today I walk in beauty. And when bad stuff happens, the big thing is to hold a religious event, a type of service that could actually go on several days, but the goal is to restore this person to beauty. So when there's been a major disruption. Now, if you think about it, the Hopi people, when a bad thing happens, they appeal to this external force, reality, God, spirit, to change their current circumstances. And the Hopi way of thinking is that when a bad thing or something happens, what we need to do is to live in harmony and come back to a place of harmony. So if you're living in a desert, their whole focus is to figure out how to live in harmony with the desert, rather than appeal to some external reality to change the desert into a fertile land. Now, what I think happens in the course of our life as Christians, whenever anything happens, the first thing we do is appeal to God to change what's happening around us. And I think actually we're really called to live more like the Navajo. It's not about getting God to change what's around us, but helping us to live in harmony and united with one another to create a world which is realistic and is consistent with the environment that we find ourselves in. And I think, for example, so when we would look at it in terms of how do we figure out how to live as Christians in this world that we inhabit today with the pandemic and everything that's happening, first thing is we want to say, well, just God, take care of it, get rid of it. And that doesn't happen. And I think what happens is that when groups of people get together, they can figure out how can we live in a way that we're not spreading this. And so I think, for example, of the fact that we are meeting virtually rather than down in the undercroft of the church. We're maintaining safe distance, or we're actually, as of tomorrow, staying at home. And it's not just about me not getting sick and getting infected, but if I was to be infected and the satellite of people that I kind of live with, chances are some of those would get sick. So it's not just about protecting myself. It's how we can all be responsible for protecting all of us as a community. And so we need to come together. And so when I think about our spiritual life, because what we need to be paying attention to, I think, is how the Spirit of God is working within us to help us adjust to a new way of living, to a new way of being, rather than just simply relying on all the old customs and practices that we've engaged in. And all of those practices we would put probably in the category of religion. Spirituality is not simply about these external things that we do, but the internal reality that we experience. And my understanding, my definition of spirituality and that which is spirit is how are we connected to that which is greater than ourselves? So how are we connected to Almighty God, that which is greater than ourselves? Then also, how are we connected to one another? But together, we will be smarter than any one of us. And so we're looking at what is the bigger environment in which we live in and how are we connected to it. And that's the heart of spirituality. And while our religious practices in some ways have been disrupted, going to church, all of those kinds of activities, what hasn't been disrupted is our spirituality. Now, sometimes the disruption in our daily life can change that and have a significant impact on it. What I've been aware of in the last couple of weeks is that I've had to become, actually it's not, I don't even have to become, it's just simply I have become a whole lot more mindful of the things that we're doing. And I can remember the first couple of weeks, particularly when we were still very much in community and engaging with one another, but we're focusing extensively on washing your hands for 20 seconds. And so I'd say the Lord's Prayer. I'd think of the people I love and care about, doing this act because I was caring for them. And not only did I not want to be infected myself, but if I was infected, the chances are they would get infected. And so as a way of caring for all of humanity, I'd wash my hands and become much more mindful. But I'm also aware, and particularly the clergy, Kelly and Joseph and I, we have pondered what it is we do on a Sunday morning and what do we need to be doing as a community in terms of streaming services. And I know David and Jacqueline and Carol have been very involved in that, and sort of wrestling with the questions of what it is that we do. Do we celebrate a Eucharist, for example, and only myself as the celebrant would partake of the sacrament? Do we engage, like this morning service, in a spiritual communion where none of us receive? What is it we're really about? What it is we're doing? And how can we convert that into a new medium, this online medium, which it's been around actually for quite a while. But for most of us, and I'm speaking for myself, it's a medium that I am just getting up to speed with in terms of trying to figure it out, and how we can confuse people by having two people in the same space at the same time, with our backgrounds and what have you that we're doing. And I think for me, part of it is just to create a visual image that is consistent. And I know when I'm in front of a group of people live, it seems very easy to be free and sort of spontaneous. When I'm just talking to a camera, it's kind of all goes weird inside. And working through that to make this a new medium by which I can just feel comfortable in terms of being me and to help you be you in this kind of process. So I think about this
Rob,
yeah.
I just want to check something out with you. When you talk about religion and spirituality, it makes me think of the Catechism's definition of a sacrament, of an outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace.
Yeah, I think that big time. I think that's our religion is sort of our outward act. And what we're looking for is that internal spiritual grace. And it's how do we help people? How do we help one another make that connection in a different way? But it also, and I think of this in terms of some of the things that I've been reading online, and it's kind of like most of us are itching to get back to normal. But clearly that's going to be a few weeks away. And if that's the whole focus, I'm just waiting until we can get over this, I think we will miss an incredible opportunity to be present in this moment and to really, at a very deep, deep level, ponder what really, really is important and what do I need to let go of. I think, for example, of Good Friday and Easter. The whole part of Good Friday, we can think about Jesus' death, but it's also about thinking about what in our own life needs to die. And a big piece of it, I think, in terms of what this experience that we're going through is what is really important and what are some of the things that I can let die. I don't need to be doing something. And I'm also very aware, and part of what Joseph was talking about in his sermon this morning is this whole thing about walking the path of suffering and dying, that if we are looking for resurrection this coming Easter, then we need to be willing to let something die. And particularly, I think it's allowing our ego to die. That the real core essence of who I am, not who I think I am, but who I really am, the person God created, could live a new life, a resurrection life. Now, you will see, and I'll probably talk about this more on next Sunday, in our society, you'll often hear people saying, well, I believe in reincarnation, and next time I'm coming back, I'm going to come back as a bird or something else. And you'll hear people use that kind of expression, or which is very similar to a glib understanding, well, we've all gone to heaven or they've gone to heaven. And this idea of heaven and reincarnation, the trivial versions of those, I think, are really just expressions. We don't like this whole idea of dying, and so we have this idea of immortality. Now, for the Buddhist people, reincarnation is a curse. It's a major curse. And the problem of reincarnation is that we keep reincarnating the same old nonsense in our life over and over again. And some of the classic examples, I can think, for example, of people who have been in a relationship with someone who's suffering from an addiction, and they get divorced. And what do? They turn around and marry another addict of some sort. And so they go through a progression of partners who are all addicts. I can even remember, for example, a congregation that I was working with in their search process, and they had called 4 active alcoholics in a row, one after the other. And they ran into trouble with each of them. But all they were doing was getting rid of one and then reincarnating that problem. And what needs to happen in those circumstances is that whatever the problem is, the part of us that's attached to the problem, that needs to die. We don't want it just simply coming back to life. We need resurrection, not reincarnation. And resurrection, unlike reincarnation, requires that part of us die.
But Rob, Joseph here. I don't want to die. You know, there are these. I've become quite comfortable with parts of my personality, and you know, I would much rather the demon I know than the angel I have yet to meet. So I don't want to die.
Well, and this, yeah, I don't think any of us do. And particularly, I think of putting together parts of our life we may have spent an enormous amount of time and energy investing in becoming something. And if that was taken away from you, that I wouldn't want that either. It's kind of like that would be very painful. And the sad thing is, I think, for example, that many people don't get to that place until there's great suffering by clinging to that which is actually unhelpful in their life. And the big piece of it also is that you can look at your life in terms of what is life-giving and what is life-draining. So Joseph, when you think of the things that are really, really draining, would it be cool if those parts died?
It would be wonderful.
And I think another part of it is, would it be cool if, and I think part of it is your attachment to these things needs to die. And that can be a little scary. I'll give you an example of thinking about things that need to die. I'd been ordained for about a year, and I was in a place called Fitzroy, New Plymouth, New Zealand, and I was parish priest. And I was walking back from visiting a parishioner, and I can still see it at this kind of this moment of awareness that as I was walking down the road, and there was a Kentucky Fried Chicken on one side of me and this big, huge old power pole that was sort of all gnarly. And it just sort of, that picture is sort of stuck in my mind. What was going through my mind was this awareness that I'd been to see this person and talk to them. And as I was walking down, and I literally in this place in the on the path, realizing that my whole purpose for seeing that person wasn't because I cared about that person. What I really cared about was what they thought of me. And what I wanted was, and this whole idea was, I wanted people to see me as a loving priest. So my whole motivation, my whole attachment, I was out there doing this thing that to outward appearances was maybe caring. But inside, I wasn't caring about them. I was caring about the image they had of me. Now, that process and sort of letting go of that need to be seen as caring, that had to die. But you can imagine if I give up that, maybe people won't care about me. And I could be awfully lonely. People wouldn't think much of me. And that's scary. That's not a place that I really want to go to, being that alone.
Do you recall what you invited the staff to let die last week as we were getting on one another's nerves?
Perfectionism?
Perfection.
Yep. Well, and I think that's another example. I will tell you the rest of the story in terms of, and it took actually a couple of years because I came to the United States and I was in a parish, and I had really got into a dark place. John of the Cross would call it a dark night of the soul. And I was in my office and two ladies came in to see me, and one of them looked across from the sofa. It's amazing how these pictures are burned into my brain when this awareness kind of happens. This lady just looked across at me and she said, "You don't care." And I didn't have the guts to tell her, "You're absolutely right." But that was a word of truth that she had spoken. And well, actually, I need to back up because this is the important part of the story. The previous week, I had celebrated the Eucharist, and I'm standing at the altar, holding up the elements and going, the gifts of God for the people of God, and inviting them to receive communion. If you had seen the little cartoon bubble of what I was actually thinking in that moment, it was, "And now beggar off and leave me alone." It was just like I was totally fried and was doing this, but I really didn't want to do it. It was kind of like I was practicing religion at that point, but my spirit was not connected to anything. And it was just after that when this lady told me that I didn't care, which was pretty clear to me, given my previous experience. And I can remember then walking out of that office after they left and thinking, today, the best I know how to do is not care, that I can't find that loving place. And that is okay, because my inability to care does not stop God caring. And they had a profound awareness of acceptance of myself, and that my inability to care couldn't stop God caring.
I think, Rob, I think that's hey, Finley. I think that's one of those.
Take a moment, Joseph. I'll let you. I want to tell the rest of the story because it I think will explain part of where I'm going here, and then we'll come back. Just bear with me for a minute, because what happened the following Sunday when I was celebrating and I was holding up those elements again. And at that moment, I suddenly became profoundly aware of God's caring for all of humanity, and particularly the people that I was present with. And so what happened was, when I gave up my little ego's desire to care and be seen as a caring person, and to be seen as a loving priest, at that point, in that moment, I became one with God's love. And it's not about me running around trying to care from my ego for others, but it is to be conscious and to be one with God's caring. So when I stopped trying to care, I became one with all the caring in the universe. And so that's what I mean, Joseph, when I talk about something has to die. And it's my attachment to my image of myself as being a caring person.
Yeah. I think one of the things that you highlighted was, I was thinking this is really where community is so important, because, or what family looks like, or friends, partners, is sometimes they mirror at me what I don't want to, the good that I don't want to accept in myself, right? So, the woman speaking this hard truth, you don't care, and potentially hearing a spouse or a friend say, you don't care about this, but to have that being said in an accepting way of, it's okay that you're not perfect. It's okay that you're broken, and I'm still here with you. Can sometimes, I think, teach me to love myself, and to hold myself as a whole person.
Rob, hi, it's Ann. Good morning.
Yeah.
I think when we talk about the experience of Lent, that I am always torn. Should I give up something, like something that I adore, chocolate? And it's so difficult. And for me, that's definitely like a death of, not being able to enjoy that. Or should I, on the other extreme, do more for other people? Send notes to people that I know that I haven't been in contact with for a long time. Think about other people. And like you were saying about the Navajos, to be more in harmony with who I am and who I should be. So I don't know if that's the kind of death you're talking about, in Lent, when you give up things.
Well, and I think part of it is the giving up in Lent is to enable you to do something else. So I think of like fasting. The point of fasting isn't just to not eat, but it is to take that time that you would have spent eating and to pray or to do a devotion or some other activity. So what are you doing in its place? Otherwise, giving up something will just create a vacuum inside of you, which my experience ultimately doesn't leave me feeling very good and doesn't really become beneficial. But I think it's the other piece of the giving up, and I think this is what we're dying to, at that point too, is our attachment to all sorts of things. And more importantly, I think the attachment that we have to our ideas of who we are. And most of the time, sort of who we think we are, my beloved Kim, in her work in terms of this area, she would talk about that's our constructed self, or another term would be ego, but it's an idea of who we are that we have constructed, and other people have it constructed, you know, our parents and families and teachers and what have you. They help us construct this idea of who we are. And sometimes that may match with the image of God that God created us to be, but I think in other times it's not exactly true, that the who we think we are is actually who God made us to be. And so part of what needs to die are our attachment to what we'd call false ideas of who we are. In a sense, the attachment to the idea that I have to be caring, rather than just being aware that it is actually in my nature to care. I don't have to care. I do, because I'm made in the image of the God who cares. And I think my running around trying to care gets in the road of being one with all the caring in the universe. And so I think it's a big part of what needs to die, are these attachments. Because that experience, and I can say, and thanks be to God, in all the years, and it's now probably about 28 years since that experience in that congregation, I have never lost that awareness of God's love for God's people when I'm offering them the Eucharistic elements. That this and the radical welcome of God to people to come to the altar, for each one of you to know that you have a seat at this altar, at this incredible heavenly banquet table. Every one of you has a seat. You know, think about a named seat at that table. And your seat is not there at the expense of anybody else. That we're all gathered at that table. And to be able to welcome people to that table is an incredible privilege. And the joy of doing that has never left. And I would say that's because it is, in terms of my experience, that's what resurrection life is about. It's eternal. It's not going to go away. My little ego will go away. But the who God made me to be won't. And
Rob,
yeah.
does that also mean that when you have a parishioner who is in need of an outward and visible sign of God's caring, and you're overstressed and overworked and you're not in that spot, that you can go to them trusting that God will provide the caring?
Yeah, well, and I think that's, yes, I think that's the big piece of it is Even just in the moment when you're stressed, to take a deep breath and just rest into it. And in that moment, and I'm not, I think we are very much incarnational people, and so we continue to need all of these practices to restore us. And so whether it be those outward sacraments, I'm not at all meaning that we get rid of them. We may have to learn how to do some of them differently. And in this period of time, we may not be receiving communion, but to practice spiritual communion, which I found to be helpful, to be mindful of what it is we are doing to access that internal grace. But I think, well, in Kelly, I'm not sure, I'm pretty sure you've had that experience. I think we've all had the experience of going to help somebody, and we may be rushed or hassled or whatever, and we say something, who knows why we said it, and we may not have said it the way we intended, but that person has been incredibly blessed. And I know I've had those experiences, and people think, wow, he was spot on at that moment. It was exactly what I needed to hear. And it's like, I'm going, I had no idea what was going on. I was just sort of running by, and it happens. And that's all I can say is that's the Spirit of God at work in our lives. And
when I think about how anxious and worried and stressed people are in their lives right now, and maybe feeling all of the things they should be doing, and offering the opportunity, the possibility of exhaling and seeing what happens when you invite God to just provide God's grace to you.
Yep.
And maybe not try to fit into a should quite much.
Actually, shoulds are interesting, is an interesting part of this. Take a moment and just think it, and just do this privately in your own mind. Think about something that you should do. And particularly in relationship to somebody else. And ask yourself why you should do it. And then ask yourself why you should do that. And keep working on the should. And my guess is you'll come to a moment of clarity if you keep asking that question. Because here's what I discovered, and it was all part of this process that I was telling you about, is all these shoulds. Whenever I say I should go and visit that person, or I should do something, the beneficiary of that should is never the person that you think you're going to care for. The beneficiary of a should is always ourselves. Because when you're saying, I should do this, what you're trying to do at that moment is to protect an image of yourself in somebody else's mind. You know, it's like I should go visit somebody in hospital, and why should I do that? It's because I want that person to think of me in a good way, a dutiful son, well, go back to the loving priest, all of these kinds of things. That should thinking, the beneficiary of a should is always me. If I should do something, that's always going to be for my benefit, not the benefit of somebody else. And the big benefit, the way I benefit from it is I have protected a picture of myself that you have in your minds about who I am. Now, the interesting thing about most of us is that you think about how you want all these different people to think of you. Most of the time, they're not thinking about you anyway. And you spend a lot of time putting a lot of effort and energy into working on protecting those pictures that they don't actually have. And they're not really running around thinking about it at all, because they're too busy working on their lives and doing what it is they are doing. So, but the other word, Kelly, that you had in there that also points out how draining this can be. You know, I'm trying, that word trying, I'm trying to do what I should. There are two huge things that could basically, if this Holy Week you let two things die, trying and should. Those would be two things to let die, because they will get in the way of you being you. And when you are you, you will find that you won't be trying, it will be effortless. And that would be, I think, an incredible resurrection, and to experience that resurrection in your life.
Katie Claggett, you seem to like that thought. Unmute yourself.
Unmute myself. I usually don't have any problem unmuting myself. I mean, we were sort of, I was contemplating all the things that I attach should to, and I was kind of laughingly tell Charlie that I was thinking I should be nicer to him. And he said, you will be the beneficiary of that. But I was also thinking about, recently I've been thinking a lot about what could I do? What should I do for our community, the world, other people in this awful situation? And really, you know, the only thing I can come up with, because I don't have a sewing machine anymore, is giving money. And I guess I think of it as I should, but and definitely I would get a lot of pleasure. I would feel better about it. I guess that's in part because it would make me more the kind of person I would like to be. I guess I don't feel that that's a bad thing, though. That's where that's what I was trying to sort of sort out in my head. And I was also thinking I should clean the house, which is not going to help anyway. Okay. That was it.
You would be the thing. I think what would happen, though, if you replaced the word should with what can I do, rather than what should I do?
Yeah.
I mean, I think, and I'm really fascinated by how a simple change in language can change our whole internal sort of experience. And so paying attention, but should thinking becomes a huge, huge burden.
When I wanted our children to think that they should do something, I would sometimes tell them that they had the opportunity to do it, and it was going to make them feel so wonderful. And that's another way you can phrase it, I guess. This is an opportunity.
And what would, in terms of concerns about the community, what would feed your soul to do? What would speak to your heart to do?
So I have noticed that one thing that has happened naturally is that I have reached out to a lot of people have popped into my head for one reason or another. And whereas normally the thought would pop and go by the wayside. In this case, I find myself writing a couple of emails a day to people maybe that I haven't seen in a really long time, or who I don't even know that well, which I would never do, but this situation gives me the opportunity to do that. So I can say, you popped into my head because I was thinking about whatever, young mothers, or I was thinking about people with teenagers, and I just was wondering how your family's holding up or something like that. Things I would never do. And that does make me feel good. It's just like, that isn't a should. I definitely don't have the feeling should about that. It's just that really has been an opportunity that has made me feel really good and has filled my soul, because there are so many things I feel helpless about. So
I think one of the things that you're doing there, and I was going through some old email the other day and I saw a name. I thought, I don't know what's happened to that person. And so I dropped them an email, and I haven't talked to this person for maybe 15 years. And they recently got engaged to a physician who's, working in this situation, which is a position of danger, and to be able to say a prayer for that person. But what's I think's going on in the midst of that is that we are reconnecting and strengthening that web of connections that we have. And it wasn't like a burden, I should do this. It was just, I wanted to be connected and to connect. I think that we have possibly more time on our hands when we can be doing some of that simple connecting and reconnecting. So that makes a lot of sense to me, that you'd be sending a couple of emails to people that you may not have talked to for years.
I think, Rob, and Kelly, listening to the dialogue, I think something that keeps coming up for me is what this whole pandemic has uncovered is how powerless we actually are. And I think we have built up these structures or walls or planning and everything to insulate us. And so it really has just, in some ways, highlighted that there's an amount of powerlessness that we actually have to accept, I think. And the other thing too, listening to you, Kelly, is I thought you were highlighting, where does my value really come from? Does my value come from what I'm doing? Or does my value come from who I be? But yeah, I think there's an element of the fantasy of being in control and having all of this power has really been poked at.
I think that the powerlessness, there's two elements to that, though. I think there is individual powerlessness and sort of the randomness that, I think of pandemics like this, and it doesn't matter how good or bad you are, you're vulnerable. I think of earthquakes and volcanoes and natural disasters, hurricanes, those kinds of things. They can sweep through the land in a very random way. But I also do think that this pandemic can show us how together we can be incredibly powerful. If I'm not just thinking about myself,
absolutely,
but I'm thinking about everybody, if we as a society knuckle down and stay at home, we can be quite powerful in the face of the pandemic. But it's together we can do something that individually I don't think we can.
Reverend Joseph, this is Jeff. I think the phrase that I'm thinking about is that we can hold close in love, either our family, our close family, or our close friends, or our close community. St. Peter's is a close community to us. It's close to our heart. Our family, we have time to have family close to heart, and we have time to have friends close to heart. And it's like the Navajos that Reverend Rob said. We have to adjust to what we're in right now. And if we're lucky, maybe we have a vaccine a year from now, and if we're not so lucky, maybe 2 years. But everything has changed around us. The materialistic, going out and getting this bauble on sale. Just thinking about what is next Christmas, Thanksgiving, Black Friday, all that stuff. All that stuff has been washed away by a great flood. We have to protect those around us in our community. We have to social isolate. We don't have a vaccine or a magic pill of hydrochlorine. I can't pronounce it. Our help is how we treat each other. And I think that's what this pandemic is showing us. We're stripped bare in our relationships and how we treat each other. They're our only salvation through this.
Well, I think that what you said there, Jeff, our health is based on how we treat one another. And that's a pretty powerful thing to reflect on, that we're not just a bunch of individuals, but we're a community of people, and my health is dependent on how I treat other people.
Yeah, I don't take credit for that. I think Jesus told us that. I think our Bishop Murray told us that. He was on CBS Friday morning, and you as the shepherds of our flock, yes, we're human, and we have to rest when we have bad thoughts or we're exhausted, but then we derive strength from our community and our love for each other, and I think that's where we are as a society. American society has been flushed down the toilet. The economy, we could have 40% unemployment. If you look at the black side of employment, the youth that are black, they've had 30% unemployment for 45 years. We all have to take care of each other, because the capitalistic get as much as I can for myself, that doesn't work in a pandemic. You have to help each other.
Rob?
Yep.
I think one of the things that I think we can do as a Christian community is give hope to people. I know that we have 15 grandchildren, and we had 2 graduating from college, and all their jobs now that they were applying for are gone, and they're all across the country. And what I found is we've been Zooming, bringing them together, and that one thing I could do is give them hope. Talking about times in history when people have had hard challenges, and I think doing that more intentionally right now is something we as a Christian community can do. And no matter what, that with faith we can work our way through this. And so that's one thing that I feel that we are called to do now. And plus it's been, the ages go from 7 years old to 32 years old. So seeing these 15 people talking to each other about where they're at, how they're dealing with it, I think has been a support for them also. So that's one thing I think we're called to do now.
Cool. Well, and I think that's one of the things that, when you think about how your families are connecting, to tap into, like, Zoom's been around for a while, and there are other variations on it, FaceTime and different things. And even the telephone's been around for a long time. But what has this pandemic taught us? We're all in this together, and how we connect with one another becomes really important. And I know that telephone circles within the parish, just as ways of tapping into check in with one another. And I know after Easter we're going to be doing, as part of the preparation for the search, to be engaged in some parish-wide conversations, and they'll be all on the telephone or in Zoom calls. That just because we are physically separated, we are not socially and spiritually and emotionally separated from one another. And it's how do we strengthen those connections without relying on those old practices that we used to do, such as gathering together.
Well, I have to say personally, every morning I send my mom, my sister, and my niece a ridiculous text from, I belong to a Facebook group called Episcopal Cats with Problems. And so to start their day off with laughter and to say, I love you, I do that each morning. But aside from that, I have to say, this is my favorite hour and 15 minutes a week because of being able to see everybody and to see the kids at chapel and to connect in this crazy 21st century way. So I just thank you all for being here while you're there.
I still find it really amazing, or just boggles my brain to ponder how we as a society, as a church community, how we would have been able to respond, or how would we have responded to a pandemic like we're able to right at this minute 20 years ago. It just, we are very fortunate with the technology that we have today compared to even 20 years ago. Just to wrap this up, one of the things that would be helpful to the staff is what I call feed forward. Now, in our society and world, we often think that it's really important to give people feedback. And I'm making a distinction here. Feedback is basically commentary on the past. What I'm really interested in is feed forward, which is ideas about what to do differently in the future. And what I'm particularly interested in is what is working in terms of what we're doing, what could we do better, and what else would be helpful to you all. I went to theology school in New Zealand. I haven't been to a seminary in the United States. I don't know what they teach in the seminaries in the United States, but I know I never took a class on mind reading. And so I need to know what, and the staff needs, I'm not sure, Joseph and Kelly, did you do a class on mind reading?
I slept through that one.
You slept through that one?
I failed.
You were doing the walking on water class at that time, right, Joseph? So it would be really helpful to get feed forward, which is advice on what's working, what could we do to make it more effective and helpful, and what else do people need? And what people need is really important to me because I really don't know. I am not good at mind reading. And so that would be helpful to me. You can send me an email or the staff email. That would, as we go through Holy Week and develop those services. But beyond that, I know I'm pretty preoccupied with, in my own mind, in terms of preparing for Holy Week and Easter. And beyond that, I think we will have some time to be thinking about formation programs, sort of continuing ed, Christian ed, but also, and I apologize, is it Kathy Clegg or Claggett? I just got half of your name. But in terms of what can we as a community can do, because I think the more we get into shutdown, I am concerned for the indigent in our society, and that a lot of the services that they've relied on to survive may not be there. And so how can we help in those ways?
And if the outreach committee is meeting by Zoom tomorrow evening. So if anyone has any ideas, to send those to Liza Weiss or me, anybody on the outreach committee, or Chris Knight's also. So yeah, I think it's going to be a really useful but challenging to label those, to try and identify those things that we can do. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
In terms of that, Katie, I'm going to be listening to that too. And the vestry is supporting whatever your committee decides. We have $50,000 in our budget for outreach that we want to use at this time. And we're also, in our own minds, tithing from our anonymous gift for outreach. And we're going to see how that unfolds. But the vestry is very interested in supporting our community financially in whatever way we can, beyond financially, but we have those resources.
Yeah. One spot that I am very aware of is that the St. Louis area food banks are really challenged to keep up. So that's only one I know about, but any more I know the resources, we want to spend them wisely, and we want to target things where we can make the most difference. So any suggestions?
Yeah, I would also like to remind everybody that there's St. Peter's Cares within our community. Kelly has organized caring circles, so we're making calls to parishioners. There's also our prayer ministry. If you'd like us to pray for anyone, or if you'd like to volunteer for that, volunteers are welcome, as well as transportation and meals, so we can take care of our own parishioners who are in need.
One of the consequences of being as isolated as we are right now is that we don't see the needs in the community in the way that we do and did when we're out and about. I'm thinking, Brian's very good article a couple of days ago in the Post about arts organizations and performers, artists who are kind of in suspense and unsupported in this time, I thought was really well done. As usual, there's an article in this morning's Post about the city's slow reaction to this crisis in terms of caring for homeless people in the city. The county seems to be more proactive and a little bit more resourceful, at least as of a day or two ago. So we don't see it face to face as we often do. And I think whatever Katie and others, whatever you all can do to help us understand what we can do in this period of isolation will really be helpful.
This is Jeff. I think the best bang for the buck is food, because there's going to be even more unemployed people, who can't pay their rent, and they need food, and if they can get food at a food bank, that relieves some pressure on them. The other thing that I borrowed from the lady that said to support the close ones to you that just graduated, things like that. All of our family members, we have time to support those around us, and we also have time to support those in the community, and we have to do both those things. This isn't a short-term thing. If there's no vaccine for a year or 2 years, the community spread, the statistical bump that you see, we could have a double bump. We could have things under control, and then it could go contagious, and and have a big enlargement because we've reactivated our economy. We have to think about, we have time to think about what's going to happen come Thanksgivings and Christmases. People are going to be short of food in 2020. Anyway, thanks. Thank you.
Rob, at the end of this session, I wanted to give you a positive note that last Sunday, the children and I weren't able to make sandwiches for the homeless at Sunshine Ministries, and I'm just trying to figure out a way that we could make that happen because we couldn't get together. So I went to Sam's and I got all the bread, got all the cheese, the meat. I got to the checkout counter and they said I could only have one brick of cheese and one package of meat. But Carol Clarkson and I had made an arrangement that I met her at church. I put all the bread and what we had of the cheese and the meat in her car while we were keeping a good distance. And she just had tears in her eyes. She said that they had peanut butter and they could make sandwiches and the men would like to make the sandwiches themselves. And to thank you all so much for supporting that program, that children's ministry that we do, that it was so important to her. And even though she had a lot of bread, she said that the men loved toast.
It's Penny. I wanted to say that I think one of the ways we could help to publicize, to let people know how meaningful this hour is, to include them, and it's recorded so that they could hear what we're talking about, what we're thinking about trying to do for the community and for St. Peter's. That we need to spread the word how wonderful this hour is, personally, not just with the newsletter.
Well, I think we will be advertising that in the newsletters and with the updates, but I also encourage each one of you to invite your friends to come to the forum. And actually, next Sunday, it will be a little different. The schedule is we will be having children's chapel at 9:30. And then we'll have a 15-minute check-in with one another. There won't be a forum topic like we had today. And we'll be finished at 10 o'clock so that people who want to connect with the diocesan cathedral service can do so. They're putting on a special Easter service. We will also have our own Easter service that will be available starting at 8 o'clock. And our Sunday services are posted up on YouTube after they've shone for the first time. So you can catch up with them at any time during the day or the week.
Rob, one thing you talk about mindful, I've been so mindful of you and your wife, Kim, moving here now. And I know my husband and I were transferred a lot. And so when we didn't know anybody, at least we could learn the city we were in. And you don't even have that opportunity. So I have been thinking so much of the two of you and thanking you for coming. So that's a thought that I've had much in the last week.
I appreciate that. And I didn't keep Kim and I in your prayers. Kim's back in Oregon and she's up in the forest on her own. Because they've been in quarantine actually longer than we have. So we talk every night and stay connected and text during the day. But it is good to be here with you folks and to be working with the staff.
So this is Laura. Oh, sorry, Rob. This is Laura Frank. I can't figure out how to make my face show up again, but I've listened to every word. I'm at my house. I'm actually in my kitchen baking bread, which be a little distracting to watch. But now I can't make my face show up. But thank you all. I've listened to every word and it's meant a lot to me. And on Thursday nights, the choir meets like this, and we, instead of rehearsing on Thursday nights like we usually do, we talk. And it's been a great way of getting to know people on a different and deeper level. So thank you all, and I've appreciated all this inspiration and the words of wisdom.
And we will be having, just in terms of services this week, at 8 o'clock each day, Joseph will be leading morning prayer. On Monday, Thursday, we'll have a service at 7 o'clock in the evening, and I invite you to have a pitcher of water in a basin. We will be washing hands and reflecting on this practice, which has become really important in our daily life, and thinking about that. And then I invite you to be at that service with some bread and some wine, and that we will remember, and you'll be able to share bread and wine with your household or on your own. I know I'll be on my own. And then on Good Friday, we will have sort of a regular kind of Good Friday service available from 10 o'clock, which will have the solemn collects and a lot of the prayers out of the prayer book in terms of Good Friday service. From 12 to 3, I will be doing meditations on the last 7 words of Jesus, and they will be, so there are 7 meditations, and then there'll be 7 periods of silence, and the silence will be about 7 or 8 minutes long, but it'll be sort of a contemplative way of waiting at the cross with Jesus. At 4:30 on Good Friday, there will be a children's chapel, Children's Good Friday service. And on Sunday, our Easter Sunday service will be available at 8 o'clock. And I'm Kelly and Joseph, is there anything else on the schedule that I need to mention?
We'll still have Bible study Friday at 7 a.m.
Oh, cool,
So
cool.
anyone who wants to participate, just email me and I'll send you the Zoom link.
Cool.
Young adults, if you know of a young adult, will gather for their Bible study on the 6th, the 8th, which, by the way, is Passover.
Cool. And if you could take a 15-second video of you and your family saying, "The peace of the Lord be with you always," and send those to Jacqueline. We will be weaving those into our worship service over the weeks to come. And that would be really cool as a way to share the peace with our wider community. Anything else before we bid one another?
Thank you, clergy and staff, for just all the amazing things you're doing for us.
Cool. Thank you. Well, go in beauty. Oh, was that Kelly? No.
Yep.
Go for it, Kelly.
Oh, I just said thanks to you.
Oh.
Hey, Finley.
Yeah, cheers. So, go in beauty to love and enjoy the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Kelly.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good week.
God bless you all.